Welcome, I'm Ed Dominguez, speaking to you from Seattle, Washington, and I'm sitting amidst a grove of beautiful native wildflowers. But not just any wildflower, this is Camas. And Pacific Northwesterners await with eager anticipation every April and May when this plant blooms. But it's not important only for its aesthetic value, for this plant was very, very important for indigenous peoples for thousands of years. But more on that later. Let's take a little closer look at the Camas. It has multiple flowers on a stalk, and each flower has 6 long purple petals, and inside the petals are 6 anthers with beautiful yellow pollen at the tips, and multiple flowers are getting ready to blossom on this stalk, flowering from bottom to the top. The vegetative part of the plant looks very much like an iris, and in fact the Camas is in the asparagus group of plants within the lily family. It makes a wonderful, beautiful purple-blue plant to have in your garden, and it's a native wildflower, meaning that it's very, very much utilized by our native pollinating insects. But this plant has a lot of historical significance. It likes to grow in dry, grassy, open meadow areas that we call prairies. When Lewis and Clark were making their expedition to find the Pacific Ocean via an inland route in the early 1800s, they wrote of vast fields of camas flowers that looked so purple in the sun that they thought they were looking at the clear waters of a huge inland lake. The Native American peoples taught Lewis and Clark the importance of the camas flower to them because the root or the corm of this plant is an important carbohydrate food. In fact, Native Americans practiced agriculture with camas. They had plots in meadows that they demarcated as their camas areas. They would hand down those fields from generation to generation like an heirloom. Early spring, they would clean out any rocks from the plot, weed the area, and then after the bulbs were harvested in the summer, they would burn off any invasive woody plants, starting fires. So camas was incredibly important to them, and they managed their camas fields with great care. And a special reason they had to manage them is because there's a white-flowered plant called death camas that loves to grow right in with edible camas. And death camas has powerful alkaloids in the root, and if you eat those, you're done. And the vegetative part and the bulb look very similar. So native peoples liked to harvest the bulbs just as the flowers were finishing, and if they weren't sure, they had ways of demarcating what areas were edible camas and what areas were the death camas, because you don't want to mix them up. They would harvest the bulbs and cook them. Now, they've got a lot of cellulose that's hard for humans to digest, so they'd have to cook them in boiling water for 24 hours. Otherwise, lots of terrible gas. Lewis and Clark wrote about that, as did David Douglas, another early Northwest pioneer. So you want to prepare this bulb before you eat it. But it was an incredibly important staple and is still harvested by indigenous peoples' descendants even today. But for the rest of us, it makes a beautiful garden and yard Northwest native flowering plant. But please, if you want to add camas to your yard, get it from a reliable source. Please don't pick it from a local park or a green belt or your neighbor's yard, because once you pull the camas up, you break off roots and it kills anything around it, camas around it. And we want to have these plants around for generations to come for us to enjoy. So, Northwest Camas, a beautiful wildflower of April and May. Thanks for joining me today, and remember, get outside.